Best case, worst case up again today. 2 videos again for you. Yep, that's right. The Big Ten on deck today. 2 Big Ten teams. Let's go. Up first today, a very interesting team, to me at least, for 2019, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, year 2 under Scott Frost, right? Well, let's recap 2018 real quick first, and then we'll get into some of the stuff for this year. But of course, 2018, not a good year, 4-8, right? 3-6 in conference in the Big Ten. Started out 0-6. I mean, it looked like it was going to be an epically bad year for Nebraska. I mean, still 4-8. Pretty bad, able to salvage it sort of in the end, reeling off 4 wins out of their last 6 games. So definitely showed some improvement in the second half of the season over the first half of the season, right? Losses to Colorado, Troy, Michigan, Purdue, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Ohio State, Iowa. Wins against Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan State, which is a surprising win. That was a weird like 7-6 or 9-6 type of game. It was really strange. And Bethune Cookman. So a disappointing year, but before you get too hard on Scott Frost, of course, he inherited a 4-win team from the year before, and in fact, Nebraska has only had 1 winning season in the last 4 years. Nebraska, traditionally, historically, over the course of 100 years, the history of college football, one of the better programs. Not the case lately. Nebraska has really struggled lately, run through sort of a string of coaches that haven't exactly worked out. They did win 9 games back in 2016, and then 4 in 2017, fired the coach. Scott Frost comes in last year, 4 wins, 4-8. That's the bad news. The good news is, why was Scott Frost hired? Well, he was hired for what he did at Central Florida, right? Not just that he went 12-0 and beat Auburn in a New Year's Six Bowl and won a fake national title. Now, obviously, that had a lot to do with it, but you have to look at the total picture. Scott Frost inherited a 0-win team. Scott Frost was only at Central Florida for 2 years, right? 16 and 17. 2015, Central Florida goes 0-12. They then hire Scott Frost. Scott Frost comes in immediately, wins 6 games, takes them to a bowl game. They finish 6-7. Year 2, 12-0. So a 0-win team he inherits. He takes them to 6 wins. Year 2, he doubles that. Goes 12-0. Nebraska fans are pointing to that and saying, well, at a minimum, then we can expect 8 wins, right? If he can double his 4 wins from 18, turn that into 8 wins in 19, although that's not what Nebraska fans are necessarily hoping for. That's not what their goals are. As a Nebraska fan, they want to be competing for Big Ten titles and playoff berths, and I get that. But realistically, if you could go to sleep now, wake up in January, and see an 8 in the win column next to Nebraska, I think you would have to say it was a successful 2019, doubling the wins from 4 to 8. We'll get into the schedule here in a second and see if maybe that's possible. But let's talk a little bit about this year's team. Of course, you got quarterback Adrian Martinez. He'll be back this year. Played last year as a true freshman. Some injury problems last year. This is a guy that got a lot better as the year went on. And this is the prototypical perfect type of quarterback that Scott Frost wants to run in his offense. He's listed on everyone's Heisman watch list, not a top 2, 3, maybe not even a top 5 type of guy. But if you look at a top 10, top 15 list of Heisman candidates, you're going to see Adrian Martinez on there. And honestly, at this point, it probably wouldn't matter. Any Scott Frost quarterback, I think, at this point is going to be getting some preseason Heisman consideration, at least for the foreseeable future, considering the success that Scott Frost has had with the quarterbacks he's had to work with. So you bring him back, huge expectations for him going from year 1 to year 2 in this new system. He was a freshman last year, and it was a new offensive system for everyone on Nebraska. You fast forward that now, everyone's second year in Scott Frost's system, the development and progress that you expect to see in a quarterback from year 1 to year 2, very high expectations for Nebraska's offense in general, and particularly quarterback Adrian Martinez. Running back, a little bit of a situation at running back for Nebraska, and I'm not really going to harp on this too much, but I'm going to give a little bit of my opinion on this Maurice Washington situation here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, he's a running back for Nebraska. In high school, he was dating a girl. They were in the 9th grade. They broke up for whatever reason. Maurice Washington becomes a football star in high school, gets the scholarship, lands in Nebraska. Fast forward 4 years later, he's in Nebraska. This girl that he dated in 9th grade sends him some text messages, congratulations, you made it, yada, yada, yada. He texts her back. It gets a little bit flirtatious. He sends her a video of her performing oral sex on someone. Now, it doesn't show who she's performing it on, but the video is from the 9th grade. So the assumption being, I guess, it's him in the video or it's someone else. And anyway, none of that. He's been charged with 1 felony and 1 misdemeanor for that because the video depicts the girl when she was 14 or 15 in the 9th grade. Even though this is 4 years later when these messages are being exchanged and, she's technically of legal age now, they've charged this guy with the equivalent, basically, of child pornography, sending it to her. Obviously, child pornography is terrible, awful, but this, to me, this isn't really a black or white issue. This has a lot of gray area there. I don't know all of the details of this case, so that's why I'm trying not to be too specific in my opinions about it. But, do I think this guy's a pedophile because he's 18 or 19 years old and has video on his cell phone of a girl he was dating in 9th grade performing oral sex? No, I don't think that makes him a pedophile. We'll see. He's had an arraignment, basically, he's always had. The court case is coming up. We'll see how this plays out. He wasn't able to practice in spring. I don't necessarily think this is going to have a huge impact on Nebraska's year in 2019. It's just a big story if you're a Nebraska fan. And so I just wanted to touch on it here and sort of give my brief opinion on it. Again, I don't know 100% of the details surrounding this case, so I'm not here to make a bunch of excuses for Maurice Washington, and I'm not here to throw a bunch of blame on him. I'm trying to just do the best I can to explain the situation with the information that I have. And my only real opinion is that this, to me, is not a black or white issue. There's some gray here. And so we'll see how that sort of shakes out. Over on the defensive side of the ball, new defensive line coach. We'll see how that works out. Don't you have 2 brothers that play defense? I think I wrote it down. The Davis brothers. You get a transfer from Oklahoma State that's going to help you out there. Nebraska's defense, well, really, any Scott Frost defense is going to be better the better the offense is. They run. I don't want to really compare it to a Chip Kelly offense, but they run a spread. They tend to go pretty quick. And you guys know how these kinds of offenses work. If you can get 2 or 3 first downs, that's great. If for some reason you come out with this hurry up and you go 3 and out in 18 seconds or something, and your defense ends up right back out on the field, these are where you see some of the issues. And again, I'm not comparing Nebraska's offense to Oregon under Chip Kelly. It's just the general idea of that type of offense Scott Frost runs. Yes, you need to have good defensive players. You need to have good defensive schemes. The defense needs to play well. But, if the offense is going 3 and out, that obviously that's going to hurt the defense. So I think the defense can take a huge step forward and be the beneficiary just by the offense being better. Not to mention how much better the defense just could be in 2019. So optimistic there. I think there's reasons to be pretty excited about Nebraska for 2019 if you're a Nebraska fan. The schedule sets up great. I mean, you have a very favorable schedule here. Well, let's just go through it. We'll put it up on the screen here, and we'll go through. You guys know how we do this by now. But start out with South Alabama, a game you should win. Now, these were games you were losing last year early in the season. So, you know how ESPN likes to do that win probability or whatever, the FBI thing. While I would probably guess Nebraska's got to be close to 90% chance to win that game, we need to see them come out and win this game week 1 to prove that they're not the team they were last year. I would expect Nebraska to do that here against South Alabama at home. Then you go on the road, take on Colorado. Not a very good team. That's another one, though, that you can point to last year and say, how did Nebraska lose those types of games? In fact, you did lose to Colorado last year. You got to get revenge and win that one this year. You could be starting out 2-0 here. Week 3, NIU at home. Nebraska needs to win all 3 of those games. Listen, it's one thing to say you're getting a little bit better, and maybe you are, and maybe you will. If you don't win all 3 of these games, it's going to be hard to take Nebraska seriously, at least for 2019, in my opinion. If you can't beat these 3 teams, you're no threat in the Big Ten. You need to start 3-0. If you want people to take you seriously in 2019, you got to start 3-0. Week 4, you start your conference schedule on the road at Illinois. That's a road game, but it's against one of the weaker teams in the Big Ten, a game Nebraska can win. Then you get a big one at home against Ohio State. Now, Nebraska outplayed Ohio State last year in the first half, especially. Ohio State did end up winning the game in the second half, of course, but Ohio State's got some issues this year. New coaching staff, new quarterback, not a lot of experience with Justin Fields, and although I think Justin Fields has a lot of talent, we've yet to see any of it on Saturdays, either last season at Georgia or even up through the spring at Ohio State. Hasn't looked like what people expect him to look like. Now, a lot can change between now and week 4 of the regular season, and I do think Ohio State has a better roster top to bottom, but you get them at home. This will be a huge game for Nebraska. The crowd will be going nuts. You had 90,000 people at your spring game again this year. I mean, they're starving for a winning product in Lincoln. If Nebraska could somehow win this game in week 4 and be sitting at 4-0, then watch out. You could be witnessing round 2 of the Scott Frost year 2 miracle here. You get another home game after that, Northwestern, then on the road, but another winnable road game against Minnesota. 6-0 looks possible, doesn't it? Take you into your first bye week, get 2 bye weeks this year. You come out of your bye week, a home game against Indiana, another one of the lower rung Big Ten teams. But now, here's the problem. I'm pointing out some of these teams and saying they're lower rung. The issue is, Nebraska, you're lower rung right now. No one cares how good you were 30, 40, 50 years ago. That's not relevant to today. You got to beat these teams in 2019. It doesn't matter what the all-time record is against these teams. Doesn't matter how many All-Americans you had in the 80s. You got to start winning these games today. So at Minnesota, then you or Indiana, home to Indiana, I'm sorry. And then on the road at Purdue. I think this is probably your toughest road game here at Purdue. Then you get another bye week. Wisconsin at home. So your 2 toughest games so far, in my mind, Ohio State and Wisconsin, you get them both at home. If you could split those, it's possible you win the division. Remember, Nebraska is in the weaker of the 2 divisions in the Big Ten. So the Wisconsin game becomes huge. You're in the same division as Wisconsin. Ohio State's in the opposite division. You could lose to Ohio State, beat Wisconsin, and still find yourself in the Big Ten title game. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Nebraska makes the Big Ten title game. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Not sure I'll end up predicting that to happen, but it's definitely within the realm of possibility. And that's hard to believe for a team that's won 8 games total over the last 2 years. After Wisconsin, you go on the road at Maryland. That's probably your second toughest road game after Purdue. And then you wrap up the regular season at home against an Iowa team that's always pretty good, never great, always good, and seems to beat a team or two. You don't expect them to beat every single year. Could Nebraska be that team this year? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. You lost to them last year, so you'd be looking for revenge there. You're not going to find a more favorable schedule within the Big Ten than this one. You avoid Michigan, you avoid Michigan State, you avoid Penn State. The toughest 2 opponents that you have, Ohio State and Wisconsin, you get them both at home. Your conference road games are against Illinois. People forgot they had a team. Minnesota, perpetually a nobody. And then at Purdue and at Maryland. 2 middle-of-the-road teams, honestly. I think if you can split at Purdue and at Maryland, and split Ohio State and Wisconsin, you could win 10 games. Forget doubling it to 8. You could win 10. I'm going to put my best case scenario here. I still think Nebraska, depth-wise, has a ways to go. There's going to be some injuries, and you just have to hope they don't happen at the quarterback position, but you're going to have some injuries. You're going to have some players who don't necessarily play as good as you expect them to. You're going to have some players who step up and play a lot better than you expect them to. But I just don't think Nebraska is where they need to be depth-wise to really run the table or anything like that. But I could see a scenario here if Adrian Martinez stays healthy and lights it up and the defense can play a little bit better than what we saw last year. I can see 9-3. I'm so tempted to go 10-2. I'm going to say best case scenario 9-3. That's probably going to irritate a few Nebraska. Listen, if you could have this same schedule right here in a year or two, 12-0. Another couple of recruiting classes for Scott Frost. Get everybody bought into what he's doing there. I just think a little too early this year to make that kind of a run. But I think 9-3 is within the realm of possibility. And I don't see you're making a bowl game this year, period. There's no way you're losing 6 games. So I'm going to say 9-3 on a best case. I'm going to say worst case scenario, maybe Martinez has to miss a game or two again. I'm going to say the worst case scenario is 6-6, although I don't expect that to happen. I think you're going to fall somewhere between 6-6 and 9-3. And if you end up 9-3, although that might not sound good to you today, I promise you'll feel better. You'll feel different at the end of the season if you look back and realize that you went from 4 wins to 9 wins in year 2 under Scott Frost. So that's it. That's the first video for today. Don't forget I'm doing 2 videos today. So that's Nebraska. Going to turn around and upload Penn State for you guys a little bit later this afternoon. Have a good morning.